What's up YouTube, I'm Mike and this is part 2 of the How Do I Cope With My Addiction Problems video series. Hopefully you enjoyed part 1. Again, if you did, please leave a comment in the section below because I have tons of this kind of content that I could produce. I usually just steer away from this and try to just produce bodybuilding content, but it's fucking so limiting. There's only so many things I can talk about. So if you like hearing these background kind of stories or my takes on life, then let me know in the comments below. So where I left you last time, I had just met my first wife and I was clean and sober for the first time in many years. The bodybuilding, for whatever reason, or as I was explaining in the previous video, the rapid changes that I was able to see in my body when I started lifting provided all of the necessary, I think, brain chemicals needed to really adhere to this new lifestyle. And so when you go from a place where you're basically the bad guy in the room at all times and nobody celebrates the decisions that you're making and you've lost everything that you care about and you've damaged all your relationships and you weigh 100 pounds maybe soaking wet and you're in really bad health and you're really lonely, and then in the span of less than a year, you go to this place where constantly everybody you see tells you how great you look, your friends are coming back around, your family's coming back around. Now you've met this girl and you're not lonely for the first time in life, and literally at that point, life could not have been better. And so that was the first step in me figuring out that I believe the true cure, there's no cure, that's the thing. That the point of this video, these videos, is to say that I do not believe there is a cure for drug addiction or a cure for an addictive personality. Like to say that I'm a drug addict doesn't even cover it. The whole impetus for making these videos is that I basically backslid into every single one of my addict type of behaviors in this, because addiction is psychological, but really before it is physical, you know. And so there are certain behavior types, there's certain bullshit you tell yourself, there are certain things that you do when you are in the throes of an addiction, and I have experienced those things. It doesn't require drugs to have that experience. The shopping that I've been doing has basically checked all of those boxes. And so my attitude toward addiction, as long as I have been fighting it, is that, like, there is no cure. There's never going to be a point in life where you are no longer a drug addict or you no longer have an addictive personality. This fairy tale idea that you can just beat this completely, I believe, is a fairy tale. I believe, you know, and a lot of people throughout the years have tried to get me to go to 12-step programs or NA meetings and get a fucking sponsor and all that shit. And I don't want to bash on anybody's success, because I think that anything that you can do to alleviate suffering, whether that be your own suffering or the suffering of family members and children, obviously, you know, I'm not judging anybody for the decisions they make. Personally, for me, I think NA is one of the single worst things that you can do, especially early on. To me, the number one thing in conquering addiction is that you have got to learn to abstain from whatever it is that you are addicted to until you can learn to control it rather than it controlling you. And so I tried going to meetings in the beginning when I was on the streets battling meth. And I spent more time in the meetings like finding new fucking sources than I did getting healing. Like the meetings to me were just a way of meeting other fucking drug users. And then there's just relapse after relapse. And then the rest of it was like fucking cult-like to me. Like I don't need somebody following me the fuck around or calling me all the time or checking in on me. To me, that's a kind of pressure that for a person who's naturally antisocial and wants to be left the fuck alone would only likely push me further into addiction. So to me, addiction is a problem that I created on my own, or it is a state of my psyche that I was born with. And so it's something that I have to work out on my own. In the same way that we all know as bodybuilders, you know, what compound in a certain compound will work for me in a certain dose and not for the next guy. You know, like I'm very sensitive to aromatization, so I cannot take any amount of testosterone without also taking Arimidex. Some guys claim they can take as high as 500 milligrams of test and have no E2 problems. So everybody's body is different and everybody's going to cope with things in a different way. And so I never really like cookie cutter approaches, which is what the NA cult sort of is to me. And so I shied away from that. So the way that I got clean is that first and foremost, I cut ties with every single solitary person I had ever used with. Deleted numbers, didn't take phone calls, stayed away from parties, stayed away from locations that I knew were likely to be addiction triggers. So when I met my girl, it was just basically her and she was going to the gym with me, and we were just living our lives together. We did a little drinking, and honestly, that really became my second addiction. For a period of time in our early relationship, I transitioned from using street drugs that were catastrophically destroying my life, and I began drinking alcohol with the guys at work, and it started in really small amounts, a bottle after work at 4:30, and then next thing you know, it's like you're sitting around a little bit longer and you're having a couple of bottles, and then next thing you know, you're keeping a 6-pack in the fridge. And my alcohol use grew from a couple of bottles of beer to as much as a quarter of a liter of vodka a night at its strongest. And so effectively what I had done was I had traded drug addiction for alcoholism. And the alcoholism was less damaging to my life and to my family members than the drug addiction. And so for me, going from crystal meth, living on the street, to having drinks in the evening with my wife, and while maintaining a job and an apartment, and we had our first child. And so I was in a functional state. I was in a state early on that the overwhelming majority of Americans, and in this case, my father included, I was actually working at a company. He had gotten me a job as part of his process of helping me get clean, sober, get off the streets. When I had proven for a couple of years that I could do it on my own, he offered me a sales job working at the company that he worked for. And so I picked up the bottle along with a lot of the other guys at work, because that was a socially acceptable way of effectively appeasing my addict brain. And so that's what I found throughout life, is that I never remained clean, truly clean and sober for any length of time. Generally, a year is about the maximum. And that only leads to very, very dark states of being. So while I was bodybuilding, I would not drink because it was negatively affecting my bodybuilding. When I started working and really putting in the hours, and we had our son, and our relationship had progressed into your stereotypical marriage, and the bills are piling up, and I'm spending a lot more time at work and a lot less time in the gym. When I was no longer getting the chemicals that I needed to feed my addictive personality from the gym, I started finding them in the bottom of a bottle. And that progressed again to the point that I was getting fucking very drunk every single night without fail. And that proceeded for a period of many years, probably 2 or 3, until I ended up getting myself arrested and having to go away for a period of 2 years in the early part of my son's life. So I don't know that I've ever actually spoken candidly about this on this channel. This may be new news for some of you. My son was about 15, my oldest son was about 15 months old when this occurred. My wife and I had gone out drinking one night, as we often did, And sometimes the alcohol would lead me into kind of dark trains of thought. And I'm really not going to talk a lot about her on this channel because that's not what the point of this video is. It's not to beat up on my ex-wife. But we got into a fight, a very, very, very bad fight. And she attempted to leave our residence drunk with my son. And I attempted to prevent her from leaving the residence drunk with my son. And so we had a confrontation where I held her inside of our apartment. We were living in Seattle, Washington at the time. Boy, was I unprepared for their fucking brand of the way they view criminal behavior. And so I would not let her leave the apartment intoxicated with my son. I thought that would be viewed as me being a person who was trying to protect the life of another. And the state of Washington, in its infant brilliance, viewed that as a crime called unlawful imprisonment. So in the state of Washington, if you attempt to prevent someone from leaving their residence against their will, even if that person is intoxicated at the time and a threat to themselves and apparently a threat to a minor child, you can and will be charged with a felony, which is unlawful imprisonment. I was actually on that night charged with 6 crimes. She trumped up a number of charges, which ended up being my saving grace. I was charged with 2 counts of assault, 1 by strangulation. I was charged with unlawful imprisonment with a deadly weapon, harassment with a deadly weapon, kidnapping with a deadly weapon, and assault 2 with a deadly weapon. So 2 counts of assault. Well, there you have it. So I think I had 6 counts total. Basically, when I got booked into county, I was facing effectively life in prison, but a minimum of 20 to 25 years is what I was facing in prison. If this is interesting, again, I'm kind of digressing from the point of this video. If you're interested in hearing about this story, again, I could make an entire video about it. So leave the comments in the section below if you want to hear all the details. I'll make a special video about this. But the Cliff's Notes version is that they offered me a deal for 12 years. And I refused to take it because I refused to admit guilt. They wanted to charge, because see, in the state of Washington, I had a firearm. I was legally allowed. I had a firearm permit, and I had a gun in the house at the time. And in the state of Washington, if there's a firearm in the home, at least at the time when I was arrested, if there's a firearm in the home when a crime is committed, they can automatically add a weapon enhancement to your crime, even if you didn't use the gun in the commission of the crime. So I wasn't charged with like holding her at gunpoint. That would be well, I was charged, but that was dismissed. I was charged with a litany of charges. So I refused to take their 12-year deal, and I took my case to trial. 4 days of jury trial where I testified on in my own defense. Their side had cops, detectives, neighbors, 911 tapes. My ex-wife testified against me. Her new boyfriend testified against me. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at me. And all of those expert witnesses and pictures and audio files and everything, they testified against me. I took the stand in my own defense and proved with their own evidence that it was physically impossible for me to have committed the crimes that they accused me of committing. In fact, one of the reasons that I was acquitted of the biggest charge, which was the gun charge, was because the police detective he testified under oath that it was physically impossible for me to have done the things with the gun, part of which was reloading bullets into the clip. She told them that I pointed a gun at her and I jacked all 16 rounds out of the clip all over the floor. But when the police came to my house, the gun was found in a completely different room, fully with all the clips with all the bullets in the clip, and the gun was not chambered. And based on everyone's testimony, I would have had to have done that in less than 70 seconds. I would have had to go find all the bullets in one room, put them all back into the clip, put the clip in the gun, move the gun to a different place in the house, and then jump in the car and leave. And I would have had to do all of that in a 70-second period of time. And their own police, their own police witness testified that there was no way possible that I could do that. He literally testified that he had loaded thousands of clips and there was no way he could have gotten it done. So, again, I digress. I was found not guilty of every single charge that was brought against me except the one charge that I admitted, which is that I wouldn't let her leave the house fucking shit-faced drunk with my kid. And so because they found a gun in the jacket pocket in a different room than the crime was committed in, the state of Washington added to my charge, the crime that I was guilty of carried a maximum sentence of 3 months. I spent 7 months in county fighting my case. It carried a maximum sentence of 3 months, but because they have this stipulation called hard time for armed crime, which I wasn't armed, they were able to add a 2-year weapon enhancement to my 3 months. And so I got 23 months in prison for telling my wife she couldn't leave the house drunk with our son. So never fucking ever move to a libtard state. This is the kind of shit that they do to absolutely destroy people's lives. Luckily, I overcame all of those things and ended up getting custody of my kids away from this woman. But again, I'm not getting into her at all. So, wow. See, this is why I don't make these videos. I try to always have like some type of direction in my mind because you just never know what's going to come out. So that happened, and when I went to prison, obviously they don't allow you to go to the liquor store, as you might have guessed. And so I was forced to no longer be an alcoholic. And the way that I coped with that when I was in prison, can you guess? I fucking hit the weights and hit them hard. And so the whole time I was in prison, I was fucking bodybuilding, and I had a couple of buddies and we all lifted together, and I've got some fucking prison photos of me like all fucking jacked up. Nowhere near what I am now. Unfortunately, you also cannot get trim in prison, or at least I couldn't. And so, so for the second time in my life, I overcame an addiction or coped with the lack of a substance that fed the chemicals that I needed to sort of feel sane by bodybuilding. And so that, again, was my saving grace. When I got out of prison in Washington, I moved back to Texas, and I continued to understand that I was never, ever, ever going to reach a state where I was not going to be an addict. And so, basically what I figured out is that the only way to cope with addiction is to find healthy things to be addicted to. So for a long time, I was addicted to fishing. I bought a bass boat. I still have a bass boat. I spent untold numbers of hours on the lake, bass fishing, white bass fishing, hybrid fishing, and that too facilitated all of those chemicals. It kept me clean and sober because all that I cared about doing was fishing. I wasn't out in the partying in the clubs. And so really what we have here is just a person who's a dopamine addict. And you know, there's a lot, anything that triggers dopamine is something that I am susceptible to becoming addicted to. And so fishing for the longest time was that thing for me. When I got bored with fishing, I bought a motorcycle, and the adrenaline rush and the danger and the whole bravado of riding a bike and going to biker bars and hanging out with this crazy crowd of guys, that too seemed to facilitate that urge. But always in the background, there would be some amount of bodybuilding. I would start up again and fall off, and start up again and fall off, until all the way it got to my current marriage. Again, I could make an entire video about how my ex-wife and I separated and how I ended up with custody of our 2 boys. If you're interested, man, I'm an open fucking book. I will sit here for hours airing out all the dirty laundry and tell you guys how all that happened. But so before I got with my wife, I made maybe the second or third worst decision of my life. And I finally allowed some family members and some friends to convince me that some of the struggles that I was having at work were related to my ADHD that I've had since I was a kid, that I just kind of, it's not that I don't believe in it. I know it's a thing. I just don't really believe that giving people fucking speed is like the ideal way of coping with it. And I think that people overuse it as a crutch for their failures. And so I didn't treat it my entire life, and I allowed some people to convince me that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. And so off to the shrink I went, and I got a prescription for fucking Adderall. And again, trying to keep this video somewhat fucking reasonably long, I started out on 10 milligrams of Adderall a day, which climbed and climbed and climbed until I was at 50 milligrams of Adderall a day. And then I convinced the psychiatrist that I was seeing to switch me from Adderall to Dexedrine at 55 milligrams a day. So I was already on a very healthy dose of stimulants, and I was on them for years. During that period of time, all of the classic stimulant effects were real. I did not go to the gym. I did not hardly eat. My marriage was in a really sad state because I was getting all of the chemicals that I cared about from the psych meds. See, they're fucking street drug. Dexedrine is speed, guys. Adderall is speed. Like, it's not quite molecularly the same as meth, but it is. If you think that you can take prescription Adderall and consider yourself clean, I think you are fucking lying to yourself. You can get very fucked up on pharmaceutical grade prescription amounts of stimulants under the guise of having fucking ADHD. And that's what I did. And then what I did was I got my son, who also has ADHD, to go down and get a prescription. And then I got my wife, who apparently also has ADHD, according to the shrink, to get a prescription. So now I've got 55 milligrams of Dexedrine in the house, and my wife is on like 20 or 30 milligrams of Adderall a day. My son's on 10 milligrams of Adderall a day, but generally they don't even really like taking the meds because they don't like all of the effects of them. So really I'm finding ways to just gobble up all of their fucking meds. And so I'm in the midst of a full-blown, effectively speed addiction, whereby I can stay up for extended periods of time without ever fucking calling a drug dealer, because I had 3 prescriptions running in one house, and nobody was giving a shit about it because I was going to work every day and paying all the bills and taking care of the family. And so, there'd be guys at work to be like, God damn, dude, like, used to be kind of big. Like, what the fuck's going on? I'm just like, life happens, man. I got 2 kids. I'm just trying to hustle, trying to make some money. And they're like, hustle my ass. You look like you're on the fucking pipe, bro. And I would just play it off because, again, what are they going to say? I have legal prescriptions for this shit. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm showing up every day to work. I'm not causing any problems at the office. I'm producing for the company. And so this is one of the problems that we have in America, where you can be basically in the same state that I was in, snorting crystal meth, where I'm a social pariah. I'm considered a problem. If I get caught, I can go to prison or federal prison, depending on what I'm doing. And my entire family hates me, and they've disowned me, and nobody wants to have anything to do with me. But because I go get equally fucked up on pharma-grade, government-produced, scripted drugs, they're totally comfortable giving me a job, and I'm having kids, and I'm, hanging out at all the family functions, and everybody's like so proud of me that I have got my ADHD under control. It's like, what are you fucking people talking about? It's the same thing. One is me being conscientious and treating my disease, and the other is me being a drug addict. Meanwhile, it's the same drug treating the same problem, which is addiction in my brain and nothing else. The ADHD, fuck that. And so I was withering away into to next to nothing again. And when I got bad, skinny, and insecure, and had no self-esteem, and my fucking dick didn't work half the time, my wife and I started having bad marital problems. I was on the verge of getting sent to prison again over a fight that my current wife and I had, and she filed for a fucking divorce. And she was like, at the time, 8 weeks pregnant with my daughter or something, and it scared the absolute shit out of me, and I fucking basically swallowed every ounce of pride that I had, and I fucking hit my knees, and I fucking begged her to give me another chance. And she had moved out. She was not living here at the time. She didn't feel safe being around me. And I got an attorney, and I got back in therapy, and I started taking voluntary drug tests once a week. I admitted to my therapist that I had been abusing the Adderall prescriptions he was giving me, so he cut all the fucking amphetamines off cold turkey, put me on an SSRI, of course, and I quit. I fucking quit. Cold turkey, I quit. And went once a month, every month, and I got drug tested to prove that I was clean. After about 6 months, maybe, I don't know exactly how long my wife and I were separated. 6 months may be a long time. We were completely separated for several months, and then we started kind of working on things and seeing each other again. And I can't remember now how long it was before we were back in our home together. And I kicked it again. And I went, oh my God. Sorry, I'm using my computer screens as backlights here, and I talk through them. So I went through all of the programs. I had the batters prevention programs, the therapy programs. I was in marriage counseling, anger management classes, family counseling. I mean, dude, I did every fucking thing. I was in counseling and therapy more than I was, it was like more than I was doing anything else. Like, I cannot even tell you the number of hours that I've spent in some kind of a program trying to work out all of my fucking issues. And my wife, who is an angel, stood by me the whole fucking way. And as hard as it is to imagine from this whole fucking crazy story, we got through it. And our life is better than it ever has been. But not without one last hiccup, which was after I'd been clean and sober for about a year, maybe a little bit longer, things were better with my wife. She was obviously happy that I was no longer abusing drugs and taking care of the kids and still doing the family thing. But this is the ultimate catch-22 of drug addiction. You can't live with it, but you can't live without it. And the reason that I finally figured out that the reason that I always relapse on drugs is because in the absence of something that activates my dopamine pathways, I just don't want to live. I become so horrifically suicidal that I literally just start shutting down and quitting on life. And so usually what happens is that I start using again, because in my estimation, using is better than dying. And in this case, I was probably as close as I've ever been to actually killing myself. And that was despite the fact that I'd gotten everything that I wanted back. I had this beautiful little girl that I loved, and everything, like so many things in my life were going great. But like when your brain, when you're an addict, I guess, or when you're an addict like me, it's like, what a person explained it to me one time like this: when you abuse uppers, like when you abuse coke or amphetamines, that your brain has like neuroreceptors, And so like your brain might have like 3 receptors and 3 transmitters. And if you see your kid hit a home run in your baseball game, in his baseball game, the transmitters send out some dopamine and they land on the receptors, and you feel great. You get elated. And so you feel happy. Unfortunately, in the mind of a drug addict, the brain is adaptable. So when you start doing meth, and I don't know how true this is, but it seems to be a good analogy for the way it feels to be an addict. When you start doing meth, your 3 little receivers over here just get flooded with meth and dopamine. And so the brain goes, oh shit, like I can't cope with all of these dopamine molecules that I'm getting. And so it adapts and it grows more receptors to try to accommodate the massive surge of dopamine that it's receiving. And so if you abuse amphetamines for extended periods of time, you get used to, basically what you do is you change the bar in your brain. So what you equate to happiness is this dopamine amount that is basically impossible to get in real life. There's, outside of like a brief burst of a huge amount of dopamine, you're never going to have an experience in life that is ever going to be on par with the drugs again. And that can lead to a lot of depression and suicidal ideology, because people who quit doing drugs, it doesn't take them long to figure out that life is sort of a consolation prize. Like, compared to meth addiction, normal life is a consolation. Even to this day, nothing on earth creates that level of happiness or that level of satisfaction than meth does. And so the good news is that over extended periods of time of being clean and not abusing any kind of stimulant, it seems that the mind begins to lower its bar again, and you can kind of learn to be happy with less stimulation. But it's definitely a challenge, and it's not foolproof at all. And so I found myself again in this state where I knew I was on the verge of a relapse, because I was either going to kill myself or I was going to go back to doing something that was going to feed into these addictive pathways. And I told my wife, I said, look, the only thing that has ever consistently worked for me in the 20 plus years, going on 30 years that I have been coping with addiction, is bodybuilding. And she's like, do it. Fucking do it. And I literally had a pair of those Bowtech adjustable dumbbells. Like, you could adjust them from anywhere from 10 to, I think they went to 90 pounds total in each hand. I had the big ones, and I had a bench. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And she's like, you know, you've tried to get back in the gym so many times, I don't believe you. And I was like, I have no choice. I have to do it this time. It's life or death. If I can't get back into a bodybuilding routine, I'm going to kill myself. And I picked up those dumbbells and I started doing German volume training on a fucking flat bench. Just 12 sets or 10 sets of 12, anything I could do to just start getting the fucking juices flowing again. And just like previously, coming off all those years of abusing amphetamines and being massively underweight and skinny and having my hormones all fucked up and having no self-esteem and no confidence and no pride or anything, I started fucking hitting those dumbbells. And I could hit a chest workout and walk into the fucking bathroom and immediately see that pump. And I wanted it. I wanted it again. And so I kept hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And so I lifted with nothing but those little fucking dumbbells and a flat bench, doing just whatever little bullshit exercises I could do for like 6 months. I started getting my weight back. I went from like 120 at my lowest, and I got back up to 145, and I was building muscle again, and I was eating again. I was starting to feel good again. I got off my vape pen. I quit taking the stupid SSRIs. I talked about this in one of my earliest videos. I got off all the fucking side drugs, and I just focused on bodybuilding until I found out finally I hit a plateau, and I read something online about TRT and testosterone levels, and I went to the doctor, and I can't remember the first reading. I think it was like my testosterone level was like 330. It was 430. It was something crazy fucking low. And I asked my doctor to put me on TRT, and he's like this fucking old guy. He's like 70 years old. He's like, absolutely not. You don't fucking need it. Your testosterone levels within the normal range. And I'm like, come on, doc, this is fucking bullshit. The range covers 90-year-old men. Like, yeah, I'm in the fucking range, but I'm, you know, at the time I was 39, and I had a 330 nanogram per deciliter test level. And he's like, absolutely not. I'm not even gonna fucking, you can go make an appointment with an endocrinologist. And so I started looking around for TRT clinics, and that's when I found Royal Men's Medical Center. I will link that in the description. I've been with those guys ever since. And I got on, made the phone calls, went through the fucking patient intake, got on 200 milligrams of testosterone a week, and baby, I was fucking back. Next thing you know, I got a full-blown gym membership. I went from my lowest of 120 when I was abusing the amphetamines, and on the 200 milligrams of test per week, I got up to about 170-ish, 165, 170. Not shredded, peeled like I am now. And from that point, I had gotten used to using the needle, and that's when I jumped on gear in full-blown gear, and I've been doing it ever since. And so, as you can see, over the course of my lifetime, since I was 19 years old to now, the drug addiction is never conquered. It's never solved. It never ends. You could make the argument that the steroids are just my current drug of choice, and if that's the argument that you want to make, fine, I accept that, because I don't have any problems being labeled a drug addict. I am and always will be a drug addict. If the thing that scares me the most in my life is that something is going to happen, I'm going to get injured, or you know, I'm going to abuse the gear too much, and the doctor's going to come to me and say, if you keep doing this, it's going to kill you. And, you know, I've made videos about it. I just don't give a shit, because the reality is, like I told you, there's this catch-22 with people who are wired like me. And that is, sometimes you can't live with your addiction because it's destroying your life and your family. But any amount of time clean and sober, and you devolve into an existential crisis where life is so unfulfilling that you start asking the question, like, why am I even here? What is the point of just fucking existing in this state that everybody else wants me to be in when I get no pleasure or enjoyment out of it? And the reality of life, guys, I don't know how many of you really sit around thinking about this. This is like a fucking game that you can't win. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. You're gonna fucking die one day. And whatever you believe about the afterlife or whatever, at the end of the day, this life is totally irrelevant. You know, I don't believe in an afterlife. I believe when you die, that is it. You go back to the same state that you existed in before you were born, which was non-existence at all. It's like if you go to sleep at night and you don't have dreams, as far as you're concerned, you're fucking dead. And then you wake up the next day and it's like, holy shit, I'm still here. And so in a lot of times in my life, I have welcomed death, because it's no more struggle. It's no more paying bills, worrying about kids, worrying about life, worrying about who's going to win the next presidential election, and are they going to fucking destroy our country, worrying about this, worrying about that. Like, sometimes it's like, dude, what's the fucking point? You know, I could amass a giant amount of wealth, drop dead, lose it all. I could cure cancer. I could be the guy that literally, you know, I could be the next Elon Musk. I could get us to Mars and beyond. I could become the greatest human being the world has ever known. And still one day I'm going to draw that final breath, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't fucking matter. In that moment, whether I was a homeless drug addict living under a fucking bridge, or I was the greatest human being who ever walked the earth, who was responsible for more happiness and pleasure and good things than the world had ever seen before, in that last final moment, those two people are the same. They are both equally fucking gone, and everything they did ceases to matter to them. And so the legacy that you leave behind is all you really have. And so that's what you have got to somehow learn to live for to the best of your ability. And it's why I have tried to dial down some of my selfish behaviors. But for me, it's always a balancing act between finding the things that I can do that make me the happiest so that I can be the best father and husband that I could be, and have those things affect my wife and children the least. Because my wife gets it. Like, she understands. She's as scared of me stopping bodybuilding as I am. She is as pro, like, she would like me to not run Trent at 300 milligrams. But she is as pro bodybuilding and bodybuilding pharmacology as I am, because she has seen firsthand what happens inside of our marriage and inside of my mind when I drop off. And she fully gets that the gym is literally my lifeline to health and sanity. And without it, I mean, if I stop bodybuilding today because of an injury or because of some cataclysmic thing occurred, I would be willing to bet you with a good degree of certainty that I'd be back on the bottle or some kind of drug in less than a year. Probably in less than 90 days. I would be probably drinking at a minimum. And so there is no cure for your addiction. The only thing that you can do, in my estimation, if you are a person wired like me, is you have to learn to pivot with it. You have to find something, some healthy thing that you can pour yourself into where you can get your addiction chemicals fed. You have to go fishing or ride a motorcycle or coach your kid's baseball team or bodybuild or fucking crochet or play video games or whatever the fuck you can do to get those chemicals that will allow you to get to sleep at night, that will allow you to attend to your children, that will allow you to tend to your wife, that will allow you to hold a job, pay your bills, pay this corrupt ass fucking government we live under their tax money. Whatever you can do to give yourself the maximum amount of happiness while doing the minimal amount of damage to those around you, that is conquering addiction. If you can do that, if you can be happy on something healthy and not hurt those around you, then in my estimation, you have conquered your addiction. But everything else is just moving sliders around. It's just like an equalizer. If you've ever played with, if you have a high-end stereo and you can bring up, you can bring up the treble, but that costs you a little, there's only so much gain you have total. And that is the reality of life. There is no cure-all. There's no fucking moment where you're just suddenly not going to be an addict anymore and you're going to be totally fucking happy just playing dolls with your kid or going to T-ball or going to the state fair with your wife. Like, if you're wired like me, there's about a 0 fucking % chance those things are ever going to truly satisfy you. So you have to find something that you can pour yourself into that will give you the maximum amount of benefit for the least amount of cost and run with that shit. And that is what bodybuilding is for me. And that's why you see the person that you see, the reason you see all these fluctuations in me. One day I'm having a trend rant. One day I'm telling you I'm quitting bodybuilding because Joe died. The next day I'm getting fucking divorced. And some guy's like, oh, he's just fucking drama queen. More spews for more views. Fuck you, dude. You don't fucking know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't live inside of here. That's the reality. At the end of the day, we are all trapped inside of our own little worlds. And all we can do is figure out how to make what goes on in here the best thing that we can make for us and ignore what everybody else tells you. So it's great when I get positive comments and feedback in the comment section, and when the haters come on, I let that shit go too, because the reality is every single person who's ever stood in judgment of me for any decision I have ever made has stood in judgment of me from a position of fucking ignorance. No one knows what it's like to walk in anybody else's shoes. We can think that we identify with one another. We can share commonalities and similarities, and that's what's always great when you get lifted up by somebody else who's been down the same road you've been down, and they can kind of see through your eyes. But it's not the same for everyone. And so there you have it, guys. This went way longer than I expected. My camera's about to die. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this rant. If you did, again, please comment in the section below. I've got way more honesty that I can hit you with if you really want to hear it. So let me know. And as always, thanks again for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.